I stood at the kitchen counter, the knife in my hand moving in steady, practice strokes, slicing through the bright red bell peppers with crisp, clean cuts. The afternoon light poured in through the wide window above the sink, turning everything warm and golden, the kind of light that used to make Robert stop whatever he was doing just to watch the dust dance in the air. Slice, slice, slice. The sound was almost meditative in the quiet house, but today it felt hollow, like my own heartbeat echoing in a room that suddenly didn't feel like home. 3 years ago, after Robert died, I moved in with my son, Marcus. Sophie had just been born, and Lauren was heading back to her job at the hospital. They needed someone reliable, someone who could keep the house running while they juggled new parenthood and careers. I still remember Marcus pulling up in front of my little condo that day, his eyes soft, almost pleading. "Mom, we can't stand the thought of you rattling around alone in that place. Come stay with us. You can help with the baby, too," he'd added, almost as an afterthought. The words stung a little even then, like a paper cut I pretended not to feel, but I brushed it aside. My granddaughter needed me. That was all that mattered. I told myself that 1,000 times on the drive over, clutching the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I slid the peppers into a bowl and reached for the onions, the sharp scent already pricking at my eyes. Marcus always said my lasagna was the one thing he missed most from childhood. Even now, at 35, a senior project manager with a corner office downtown, he could put away half a pan without blinking. Thinking about it made me smile, but the smile felt thin today, like it might crack if I held it too long. In my heart, he would forever be that round-faced boy with the gap-toothed grin, running to me with sticky fingers and a new drawing, shouting, "Look what I made for you, Mommy!" "Grandma!" A high, excited voice rang out from the hallway, followed by the rapid patter of bare feet on hardwood, the sound so pure it pierced straight through the ache in my chest. My Sophie burst into the kitchen and flung herself at my legs, her little arms wrapping around me like vines. At 3.5, she was all energy and curls, a whirlwind in a purple tutu. "Careful, sweet pea," I laughed, the sound catching in my throat as I set the knife down fast and scooped her up. She smelled like baby shampoo and the faint sweetness of the strawberry yogurt she'd had for snack, and for a moment the weight of everything lifted. Her dark eyes, so much like her father's when he was small, sparkled up at me, and I felt that familiar tug, the one that had kept me here day after day, folding tiny socks and pureeing vegetables long after my own dreams had gone quiet. "Look what I made!" She thrust a sheet of construction paper at me, covered in wild scribbles of purple and yellow, the colors bleeding into each other like a sunset gone wild. "Let Grandma guess," I said, pretending to study it seriously, tracing the crooked lines with my finger as if they held the secrets of the universe. "Is it a rocket ship?" "No!" she giggled, kicking her legs, her whole body shaking with delight. "It's a butterfly garden." "Of course it is," I said, kissing the top of her curly head, breathing her in like she was oxygen. "The prettiest butterfly garden I've ever seen. Should we show Daddy when he gets home?" "When is Daddy coming?" she asked, suddenly serious, her little brow furrowing, in that way that always made my heart twist. I glanced at the clock above the stove, the second hand ticking too loudly in the silence. 5:47. "Any minute now, baby." As if I'd summoned him, the front door clicked open, the sound sharp and familiar, like a key turning in a lock I wasn't sure I wanted open tonight. Sophie wriggled down and shot off like a bullet. "Daddy!" I dried my hands on the dish towel, the fabric rough against my palms, and followed, reaching the foyer just as Marcus swung her up onto his hip. He looked exhausted. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled, the faint lines around his eyes deeper than they'd been last year, etched there by spreadsheets and deadlines and the weight of providing. But his smile when he saw Sophie was pure sunshine, the same smile that used to light up our little house when he was 6 and Robert came home from work. "Hey, Mom." He leaned in and kissed my cheek, the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the day's sweat. "Something smells amazing." Lasagna, I said, taking his laptop bag, the leather still warm from his hand. Figured we'd celebrate Friday properly. His eyes lit up, then something shifted, a flicker I caught because I'd been watching for it for years now. Actually, big news at the office today. I closed the Henderson account. They bumped me to director. My hands flew to my mouth, joy and pride rushing through me so fast it hurt. Marcus, that's incredible! I know, right? He grinned, the tired lines smoothing out for a moment, and for a second he was my little boy again, bursting through the door with an A-plus paper. We're going out tonight. I booked a table at the Capitol Grill. Lauren's meeting is there after her shift, and her parents are already on their way. The words hit me like ice water poured straight down my spine. I forced a smile, felt it tremble at the edges. That's wonderful, honey. You all deserve it. Marcus was already loosening his tie further, oblivious, the way he'd been oblivious to so many small things lately. We're taking Sophie, too. The Thompsons insisted. The whole family should celebrate. He ruffled Sophie's hair, and she beamed up at him. Mom, there are leftovers in the fridge. Just heat something up. We'll probably be late. He didn't even notice how my hand froze mid-air, how the laptop bag suddenly felt heavier than the world. Lauren's parents, of course. The whole family. Except me. If this story broke your heart even a little, please subscribe to the channel. There are more like it, and I'd love to have you here with me when the next one comes. I stood there in the foyer long after the door closed behind them, Sophie's excited chatter fading down the driveway like a song I wasn't allowed to sing along to. The house felt suddenly enormous and hollow, the air thick with garlic and oregano, and the ghost of a celebration that didn't include me. In the kitchen, the lasagna I'd spent all afternoon layering sat cooling on the stove, the cheese already congealing into hard, disappointed peaks. I turned off the oven with a click that sounded too final, wrapped the pan in foil, my fingers trembling slightly as I pressed the edges down, put it in the fridge next to the garlic bread I baked from scratch, the loaf still fragrant, still warm enough to fog the glass shelf. My phone buzzed on the counter, rattling against the marble. A text from Lauren. Mom, don't wait up, and don't let the lasagna go to waste. Heat up a piece. Then a photo, the private dining room at the Capitol Grill. Crystal chandeliers dripping light like diamonds. White tablecloths crisp as fresh snow. Lauren's parents raising champagne flutes that caught the glow and threw it back 1,000 times. Marcus in the center, arm around his wife, Sophie on her grandfather's lap in a fancy dress I'd never seen before, the kind with real satin bows. Everyone beaming, teeth bright, eyes shining, alive with triumph. I was nowhere in the picture. I typed back, "Enjoy yourselves." Set the phone face down on the counter. The screen cracked faintly against the marble. Click. Like something inside me finally giving way. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in on your eardrums. I wandered into the living room and turned on the TV just for noise, any noise. Some cooking show. A cheerful host slicing peppers exactly the way I had an hour ago, his knife flashing under bright studio lights while he laughed about family dinners. I stared at the screen but saw only that photo, the empty space where I should have been. I opened my photos and scrolled back 3 years, my thumb shaking. The first Christmas after Robert passed. Marcus had insisted on a professional family portrait at the mall studio. There we were, Marcus and Lauren on either side of me, Sophie a tiny bundle in my arms, her little fist curled around my finger. My smile in that photo looked so certain, so sure I still belonged, that this new chapter would be gentle. Now I wasn't even invited to a celebration under my own roof. I closed the album and went to the master bedroom, the air in there cooler, scented with Lauren's expensive perfume that lingered like judgment. The wedding photo above their bed, Lauren in a gown that cost more than my first car, Marcus gazing at her like she hung the moon. On her dresser, the diamond earrings he'd bought her for their 10th anniversary last year. I'd helped pick them out, standing in the jewelry store, clutching my purse, using the last of Robert's life insurance money to contribute because I wanted her to feel loved,
to feel like my daughter. In Sophie's room, the walls were pink and covered with decals I'd put up myself, my fingers raw from the adhesive backing. The rocking chair in the corner, I'd rocked her to sleep in it every single night for the first year, humming the same lullaby my own mother sang to me, feeling her tiny breaths against my neck like blessings. On the shelf, the quilt I'd sewn when Lauren was pregnant, each square a different fairy tale scene, my eyes burning from late nights under the sewing lamp because I wanted Sophie to grow up wrapped in stories and love. At least Sophie still needed me. I whispered it like a prayer, but the words tasted like ash. Back in the living room, I pulled the big leather-bound album off the shelf, the one I'd started the day Marcus was born. My fingers left prints in the thin layer of dust. Page after page of his life. First smile, gummy and perfect. First steps, wobbly toward Robert's open arms. The cake smash first birthday where he'd painted the walls with frosting and laughed so hard he fell over. His high school graduation, arms around Robert and me like he'd never let go, his cap tassel brushing my cheek. I'd given everything for those moments. Skipped vacations, worked double shifts, sold my mother's china to pay for braces, stayed up all night sewing Halloween costumes because store-bought felt impersonal. And now I ate leftovers alone while they toasted without me. My phone rang. My old neighbor Diane, her name lighting up the screen like a lifeline. "Margaret? You sitting down? Lauren told me Marcus got promoted. They're talking about upgrading to that new development, Riverside Heights. Those houses start at $800,000. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the arm of the couch. Riverside Heights? I heard my voice crack, thin and far away. Yeah, Lauren said now that the compensation from your old house is coming through, they can finally make the jump. I gripped the album so hard the spine creaked, the letter biting into my palms. Compensation. My house. The one Robert and I had paid off with 30 years of double shifts and skipped vacations. The one where we'd planted roses along the walk and painted the kitchen yellow because it made me happy in the mornings. Marcus hadn't mentioned a word. After I hung up with Diane, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone, I stood on the balcony and watched the city lights flicker on, one by one like stars giving up. Somewhere across town, my son was laughing in a private room with people who called themselves the whole family, their glasses clinking while the woman who had given him life heated leftovers alone. I was heating leftovers. The thought looped over and over until it became a scream I swallowed back down. I went back inside, opened the freezer, and stared at the lasagna like it had betrayed me, the foil gleaming coldly under the fridge light. Then I walked to my bedroom, the tiny guest room at the end of the hall they'd given me when I moved in, the one with the single window that faced the neighbor's brick wall, and pulled the small suitcase from the top shelf. Robert's old suitcase. The one he'd taken to the hospital the last time, the one that came home empty except for his watch and wedding ring. I opened it. The faint scent of hospital soap still clung to the lining, sharp and antiseptic, a smell that used to make me cry in parking lots. Just for a few days, I told myself, my voice trembling in the quiet room. I packed 3 changes of clothes, my medications, my wedding ring I'd stopped wearing because it got in the way of dishes, and the photo of Robert from my nightstand, the one where he was laughing on our honeymoon, wind whipping his hair, eyes full of forever. On the kitchen counter, I left a note, my handwriting steadier than I felt. Taking a few days at Diane's. There's lasagna in the fridge. Sophie likes the corner pieces. I taped it to the fridge, right over the crayon butterfly garden Sophie had drawn last week, the purple and yellow wings bright against the stainless steel. When I closed the front door behind me, the click echoed like a gunshot, and something inside cracked wide open, raw and bleeding and strangely free. The elevator right down felt like falling, the numbers blinking slower than my heartbeat. In the lobby, the night security guard looked up from his phone, his face creasing with concern. "Mrs. Margaret? Everything okay?" "Just visiting a friend," I managed, my voice sounding like someone else's. He nodded, concerned, but didn't push, just held the door for me like I was made of glass. Outside, the summer air was thick and warm, heavy with jasmine from someone's garden. The last bus had gone, so I called a cab, the dispatcher's voice crackling through the line like static.
The driver glanced at my suitcase in the rearview mirror. Airport? No. 1427 Oakwood Lane. Diane's address. The one place I still had a key. The one place that had never asked me to be anything but Margaret. As the cab pulled away, the house shrinking in the side mirror, my phone buzzed again. Lauren, Sophie can't find her bunny. Do you know where it is? I stared at the message until the screen went dark, the words blurring through sudden tears. Let them look. They needed to remember what it felt like to search for something themselves, to realize some things can't be replaced with a quick trip to the store. At a red light, we passed a family walking home from dinner, parents swinging a little girl between them, all three laughing, her shoes lighting up with every step. My eyes filled so fast the streetlights smeared into watercolor streaks. Robert and I used to do that with Marcus. We'd walk to the ice cream shop on Friday nights, his small hands sticky and ours, promising the world was soft and safe and ours. The cab stopped in front of Diane's little bungalow, the porch light glowing like a beacon. I paid, dragged the suitcase up the steps, and stood there a long time, my finger hovering over the bell, afraid that once I pressed it, there would be no going back. Diane opened the door in her robe, hair in curlers, eyes wide with alarm that melted into understanding the second she saw my face. "Margaret, honey, what on earth? Can I stay a few days?" She pulled me inside without a word, her arms strong around me, the scent of her cold cream and the faint lavender of her sheets wrapping around me like the home I'd lost somewhere along the way. That night I slept on her pull-out couch, the springs creaking under me like old bones. The first night in 3 years I hadn't fallen asleep to the sound of a baby monitor hissing in the dark. I woke up to birds and sunlight and the smell of real coffee, not the instant they kept at the house, because Lauren said it was faster, not the coffee I brewed at 5:30 every morning so Marcus could grab a cup on his way out the door without ever looking up from his phone. Diane set a mug in front of me, the steam curling between us like a question. "Now, tell me what that boy did." So I told her everything, my voice cracking on the parts I'd been swallowing for years, the words spilling out like blood from a wound I hadn't known was fatal until tonight. When I got to the part about the compensation money in Riverside Heights, her face hardened, the lines around her mouth deepening the way they did when someone hurt one of her own. "That house is half yours, Margaret. Robert's name is still on the deed." "I know." My voice sounded small, far away. "Then why are you here instead of raising holy hell?" "Because I needed to breathe," I said, the truth of it hitting me like a wave. Just for a minute, just long enough to remember who I was before I became the person who heats leftovers while everyone else celebrates. Diane nodded like she understood, her eyes fierce and tender all at once. "Well, breathe here as long as you need, and tomorrow we're going to the old neighborhood. I want to see these demolition notices with my own eyes." The next morning we took the bus across town, the city sliding past the windows in a blur of memory. Everything looked smaller, faded somehow. The corner store where Robert used to buy lottery tickets and kiss me goodbye. The park where Marcus learned to ride a bike, his knees scraped raw, my heart in my throat until he laughed. At the community bulletin board, there it was, in bold red letters, screaming against the morning sun. "Demolition notice. Building 7 scheduled for redevelopment. Owners must register within 30 days for compensation."
Diane read over my shoulder, her breath catching. "That's your building." My knees felt weak, the world tilting like the ground had shifted under me. A neighbor I hadn't seen in years spotted me, her face lighting up before it fell. "Margaret Thompson, Marcus was here 2 weeks ago with a stack of papers taller than he is. Said he was handling everything for you." Handling everything. The words tasted like rust in my mouth. I thanked her and walked to the management office on autopilot, my sandals scuffing against the cracked sidewalk where dandelions pushed through like hope. The clerk, a young woman named Kayla, remembered me, her smile faltering when she saw my face. "Mrs. Thompson, your son was just here. Preliminary compensation is $378,000. He said you'd had some health issues and gave him power of attorney." I felt the floor tilt, the air suddenly too thin.
Power of attorney. I'd never signed anything. Kayla pulled the file, her fingers hesitant now. There it was, my signature. Only it wasn't mine. The loops were wrong, the pressure too even, the M in Margaret too perfect, like someone had practiced it in a mirror. Forged. Diane's hand gripped my arm hard enough to bruise, grounding me as the room spun. Outside, I leaned against the wall and stared at our old apartment, the balcony where Robert and I used to drink coffee on Sunday mornings, watching the neighborhood wake up, the window box where I grew tomatoes every summer, their scent thick and green in July. All of it about to be rubble. And my own son had planned it without telling me, had taken a pen and tried to erase me from my own life. Diane drove me back to her place in silence, her old Buick rumbling like my thoughts. That afternoon, I called the lawyer Diane's brother recommended, Thomas Grant, family law, his voice calm and kind on the phone. He listened without interrupting, the way good listeners do, then said, "Forged power of attorney is fraud, Mrs. Thompson, and the house was joint property. You're entitled to half the compensation minimum. We can stop this today." I closed my eyes, saw Robert's face the day we signed the mortgage papers, his hand steady on mine. "I don't want to destroy my son." "You're not the one destroying anything," Thomas said gently, the words landing soft but sure. "But you do need to protect yourself, and maybe, just maybe, protect him from becoming someone neither of you recognizes." I hung up and sat on Diane's porch until the stars came out, the night air cool against my wet cheeks. My phone had 37 missed calls, 20 texts. They blurred together into one long plea. The latest from Marcus, "Mom, where are you? Sophie won't stop crying for you." I typed back with shaking fingers, "I needed space. I'm safe. Tell Sophie I love her." Then I turned the phone off, the screen going black, like a door closing. The next day, Thomas met me at the management office, his suit crisp, his handshake firm. We revoked the fraudulent power of attorney on the spot. Kayla's eyes were wide. She had no idea, kept apologizing like it was her fault. Thomas also filed an injunction, freezing any disbursement until both owners signed, his pen scratching across the forms like justice itself. When we walked out, the sun felt different on my skin, warmer, like it had decided to shine for me again. I felt taller than I had in years, my spine straightening one vertebrae at a time. That evening, Marcus showed up at Diane's door, eyes wild, hair standing up like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "Mom, what the hell is going on? They said you revoked everything." I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me so Diane wouldn't have to watch, the wood warm from the day's heat under my palm. "I know about the forged signature, Marcus." His face went white, the color draining so fast I thought he might faint. "I know about Riverside Heights. I know you planned a basement room for me, close to the laundry. Convenient." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at me like a stranger.
Mom, it wasn't don't. My voice was calm, steady, the kind of calm that comes after a storm has already torn the roof off. He looked at the ground, scuffing his shoe against the welcome mat, like he was 10 again and had broken my favorite vase. Lauren said you'd fight the demolition because of Dad's memories, that you'd make it harder for us to give you a better life. A better life. In a basement. The words hung between us, ugly and naked. I took a deep breath, tasted the night air, jasmine and cut grass, and something that might have been freedom. I'm staying here a while. When you and Lauren are ready to really talk, you know where to find me. I went back inside.
He didn't follow. For the first time in 3 years, I slept through the night, the kind of sleep that feels like drowning and waking up on the other side of something. The next week was strange and beautiful, like discovering a room in your house you never knew existed. I walked every morning, my sneakers silent on sidewalks I hadn't touched in years, read entire books in one sitting, the pages turning under fingers that weren't sticky with applesauce. Diane and I watched old movies and ate ice cream for dinner, laughing until our sides hurt at scenes that used to make me cry. And I started painting again. I'd loved watercolor in college, before marriage and mortgages and motherhood swallowed every spare minute, before my brushes gathered dust in a box labeled, "Someday." Diane dug an ancient set out of her attic, the pans cracked but the color still vivid. The first stroke on paper felt like coming home, the pigment bleeding across the page like all the words I'd never said. My phone stayed mostly off. When I did check, the messages broke my heart and hardened it at the same time. Sophie had a fever. Sophie missed Grandma. Sophie wouldn't eat. Then, finally, one from Lauren. "We need to talk. Please." I agreed to meet them at the house on Saturday, my stomach knotting and unknotting like a fist. When I walked in, the place smelled like lemon cleaner and desperation, the air thick with everything unsaid. Sophie launched herself at me the second I crossed the threshold, her little body slamming into mine like a meteor. I held her so tight she squeaked, buried my face in her curls, and let the tears come for the first time in days. Marcus and Lauren stood in the living room like children waiting for punishment, shoulders hunched, eyes red. Lauren spoke first, her voice small. "Mom, I was wrong about everything." Marcus couldn't even look at me, his gaze fixed on the floor like it might open and swallow him. I set Sophie down gently, my hands lingering on her shoulders, and faced them. "I'm listening." Lauren's eyes filled, her throat working. "I got scared. The promotion meant more money, but houses are insane, and I thought if we handled everything quietly, you'd just be happy in the new place. I convinced Marcus it was kinder." She laughed, a broken sound. "Kinder. God, what a lie." "Kinder than asking me?" I asked quietly, the question hanging in the air like smoke. She flinched, wrapped her arms around herself like she might fly apart. Marcus finally spoke, voice raw, scraped clean. "I should have stood up to her. I should have told you from the beginning. I was ashamed, Mom, ashamed I let her talk me into forging your name." He pulled a folder from the coffee table, hands trembling, and handed it to me like it burned him. Inside was a new agreement, 50-50 split, my name on the new deed if they bought, a south-facing bedroom with ensuite bath, no basement anything, and a printed apology from Lauren, notarized, admitting the forgery and agreeing never to make financial decisions affecting me without my consent, her signature shaky but there. I looked up, my eyes burning. Why should I believe this will stick?
Lauren swallowed hard, met my gaze for the first time. "Because if you don't, we lose you. And Sophie loses the only grandmother she's ever known. And Marcus loses his mother. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Therapy, space, time, anything." I was cruel, Mom. I see that now. I was terrified of losing the life we were building, and I almost lost the family we already had. Marcus added, voice cracking like ice. "I looked through the albums while you were gone. Every page. You gave up everything for me. Your art, your friends, your dreams. And I repaid you by trying to take the last thing you had left of Dad. I hate myself for it." Sophie tugged my hand, her eyes huge. "Grandma, stay?" I knelt to her level, cupped her soft cheeks. Grandma needs her own place now, baby. But I'll be close, and you can come stay with me anytime. We'll paint and bake cookies and have sleepovers. I promise. Her lower lip trembled, but she nodded, brave as always. Marcus whispered, his voice barely air. Will you ever forgive us? I looked at them. At my son, who looked broken, at my daughter-in-law, who finally looked small, and felt the anger start to drain, slow and painful, like poison leaving a wound. Not today, I said honestly, my voice steady even as tears rolled down my cheeks. But maybe one day, if you keep proving this isn't just panic talking. If you show me, day after day, that I'm not just convenient. They both nodded like children who'd been caught and knew they deserved it. 6 months later, the demolition money came through. I used my half to buy a sunny 2-bedroom condo 10 minutes from their new house in Riverside Heights, on the ground floor, with a patio garden bursting with roses and a spare room that smells like turpentine and possibility. I turned the second bedroom into a studio. Watercolors cover the walls now, bright and bold, and mine. I teach a beginner class at the senior center on Tuesdays, my hands steady as I show women my age how to let the paint do what it wants. Marcus and Lauren kept every promise. My room in their new house is beautiful. Big windows that catch the morning light, my own bathroom with the heated floor I never dared ask for, a window seat where I read to Sophie on weekends while she traces the patterns in my latest painting with sticky fingers. Lauren still flinches sometimes when money comes up, but she's trying. Therapy, Marcus says quietly one night, for both of them. She leaves my favorite tea on the counter when I visit, a small peace offering I accept with a nod. Some wounds scar over, some never quite do. But every Friday night, I make lasagna, the kitchen in my condo filled with the same smells that started this whole story. And every Friday night, they come to me. Marcus, Lauren, and Sophie with her overnight bag and a new butterfly garden drawing clutched in her fist. We eat around my little table, the one I painted sunshine yellow because it makes me happy in the mornings. And Sophie shows me her latest masterpiece while Marcus refills my wine glass without being asked. And when the dishes are done, Marcus hugs me longer than he used to, his arms strong around my shoulders, his voice rough against my hair. Love you, Mom, he whispers every time like he's afraid I'll forget. I never will. Because I learned something the night I walked out with that suitcase, the night the bell peppers went cold on the counter. Love isn't measured by how much you give until there's nothing left. It's measured by whether they notice when you stop. I stopped. They noticed. And somehow, painfully, beautifully, we all started again. The bell peppers on my cutting board that first afternoon, the ones that began this whole story, ended up in a lasagna that fed my family in my own home on my own terms, the cheese bubbling golden under my own oven light. Full circle. If you've ever felt invisible in the one place you should matter most, leave your story in the comments. You're not alone. And if this touched you, subscribe. I have so many more stories to share. We're in this together.